Thank you, Max. Mr. Bourne,
Al Bourne, present.
Mr. Good,
Jerry Good here.
Mr. McCracken,
Matt McCracken here.
Mr. Gamelki,
John Gamelki here.
Tony Perry here.
David Mihatis here.
Rusty Neal here.
Rebecca Anderson here.
Mr. Arden had Weatherford had a personal appointment. He may be joining us remotely at some point. Okay, so let's do the pledge of allegiance. Good.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. So are there any additions, deletions, corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move on. Any public comment or items not on the agenda? Mr. Coy, you have 3 minutes.
Excuse me, Tony, can I just make a comment? Tanner is here today to clarify a few things that were brought up at the last meeting about records and his knowledge of that. I think it would make sense to give him the opportunity to clarify a few things because it has been brought out publicly.
I welcomed him to the microphone. He has
Yeah.
3 minutes to be succinct and clear in his communication.
It doesn't seem very.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Good morning. It's good to be here again. It's been a while since I've had to make it to one of these. I'm Tanner Coy and Mr. Chair, I do want to let you know I'm here to address some questions that were brought up. I do have some information that I would like to offer to the board, and I think you'll find it very helpful. And with all that said, I don't know that I can capture it in 3 minutes. So I'll do what I can. But if 3 minutes really is the deadline, then I'm going to have to conclude here shortly and before I get through some important things.
How
So
about closer to 3 than 30?
closer to 3 than 30.
Yeah.
No problem.
So
I've watched the last few board meetings. Mr. Good had come to me and mentioned some of the topics that have been brought up and that there were some questions and concerns of the board. So I went back and watched the meetings. I think I'm up to speed with the issues you've been discussing and what those discussions are. And I do think I can help. I was a little bit surprised with the last meeting to hear my name and some of the issues that were brought forward and the deep concern that you have. And I was surprised because I remember standing here and making myself available to the board. And so when I read my name in the paper, because of core requests and these records concerns, and no one has contacted me, I was caught by surprise. So I paid very close attention to the things that were said and what the issues are. And I want to begin by starting with records, talking just a little about TIF, and then concluding with records, other records, specifically these big holes in the records and missing records that seem to be of concern. So to start, first of all, with regard to the Cora requests that seemed to set off some alarm and made the news, when I submit record requests, I want the board to understand that I do so with complete disregard for what anybody might think about or speculate or be curious about what I might be up to or asking for or whatever. There's no game involved. There's no gotchas. It's just a Records Act request. And I think Cora is a very good and positive thing. We all would agree to that. It's a mechanism intended to keep our governments transparent, and more citizens should actively use their rights to access records. If they did, they would be more informed, and that would be good for all of us. I think we probably all agree with that. And so I just want to set that foundation for core requests that seem to be kind of alarming and hopefully aren't. Hopefully that's not an issue going forward, because I will submit more and others should as well. And we should all promote that. Pursuant to the record request that I submitted, I was given some financial documents. And I took a look at those and realized right away that the DDA's revenue for 2022 was not what it was supposed to be. And it was significantly off by about $79,000. That is not the first time that's happened. It's the third that I know of. I reached out to the county and asked for more records, which they gave me right away. I reviewed those and saw that their records matched the cities and the DDAs. So the amount of revenue that the county had paid to the DDA and the amount of revenue the DDA recorded receiving matched, which told me that the error was at the county side of things in determining the amount of revenue that was owed to the DDA, and their payments were not correct. So I notified them of that. I called the county treasurer's office back, thanked them for the records, and let them know that there was a big discrepancy. Mr. Salusta then called me shortly thereafter. I explained to him exactly that, and he said he would look into it when he got back in town. So after that conversation, I called your treasurer, Miss Anderson, and we had a great talk about the revenues and how much money was missing, and shared some documents around that, including the abstract and the certification of values, et cetera. And to my understanding, the county has corrected the issue and delivered a check to the city. So you should be whole for 2022 revenues, and that was a $79,000 discrepancy. That's what came from the core requests. So it's a very good thing. And you know, another thing I heard at last month's meeting was from the chair asking for current and former DDA board members to be on team DDA and to show up and help the DDA do the best it can for the community and make sure the records are what they need to be, et cetera. And so, you know, I think that was a great kind of rally cry, and I heard that. And so I'm here, and I share this example with the core request as an example of being on team DDA and doing something to try and be helpful to you and not be an impediment or difficult or lacking in transparency or whatever. So hopefully that clarifies core requests. And it's also an example of DDA finance and some of the complexities, and that you still would likely benefit from some additional assistance. And I remember a proposal that I put on the table, and I think it's something you might want to reconsider because there are other things in DDA finance that we can review together and probably catch and correct some errors to the benefit of the DDA. And I would love to participate in that with you. Moving on, another one of the issues I heard come up, and there was a lot of discussion around and some confusion. And I think you may have it straightened out at this point. I don't know, but it has to do with personal property tax as part of TIF and your agreements. And there's one agreement in particular that is the catalyst for this discussion. And it's Mr. Taylor's, Taylor Mountain Enterprises. And I know that you were provided some of the correspondence between myself and the former DDA attorney regarding that contract and the questions surrounding personal property tax. So I just want to shed a little bit of light on that. I hope you've reached the conclusion that personal property tax is a part of that agreement. But I'd like to offer you a little bit more, some institutional knowledge that I gained.
That is a topic on the agenda. So this
All three of these
piece,
topics are on the agenda.
yeah, well,
So
this piece
we're
of it-
coming up on 8 minutes.
Okay,
We are going to address the Taylor thing. I will address the core request conversation And in the chair report, we are talking about the county error. So do you have anything beyond those three topics?
Well, the county error, I don't see anywhere on the agenda, so forgive
It's in the
me.
chair report.
Okay, I didn't read a copy
It's
of
in
the.
yeah, you can
Okay.
grab a copy of the packet at the back of the room and see what we're discussing.
Well, again, I heard my name come up and I heard some claims and accusations and I heard some concern and I'm here to answer to that. So if the DDA doesn't have the time to afford for those answers as you requested, then I can conclude. But I think this stuff's important. What I'd like to mention on the personal property tax is not specifically Mr. Taylor's agreement, but about personal property tax. And it's something important that I learned when going through the drafting of that agreement. And that is that the agreement is not actually the beginning and ending of the deal. It's not as if it's not in the contract, it doesn't exist. That's not true. And you need to know that. You operate in a world that is structured by statute, by laws and regulations that contract exists within. So for instance, the DDA statute defines taxes as including both real and personal property tax. So when you're referring to that in your legal agreements, you're referring to that definition. That's part of it. The other part, though, and that's less commonly known, and I think would benefit you guys greatly to know and to review, is that TIF regulations are largely captured in the Assessor's Reference Library, Volume 2, which is a nearly probably 1,000-page document that is published by the Division of Property Taxation and given to county assessors. And it defines how TIF is quantified at the county level and distributed to the DDA. And it's really important to know that, because if you go through and read that document, it will inform you and open your eyes to what TIF is outside of just the DDA board, but at a county level and state level, how it works. And once you understand that, it will make your administration of these agreements and your negotiating of them and your structuring of them and the language you use in them, it will affect all of that. So I highly encourage you to take a look at the Assessor's Reference Library, Volume 2, and particularly I would draw your attention to page 694, I believe it is, that I'm sorry, 679, that tells us that value attributable to new personal property accounts as part of new development in the TIF area does go to the increment value, which means it does generate revenue for the DDA. And if it generates revenue for the DDA, it is a part of what your contract defines as the available TIF revenue. And therefore, it is a part of the TIF reimbursement calculation. That is not only the case for Mr. Taylor's agreement, but it's really the case with all of your agreements. Now, not all of those accounts, those real property accounts, have personal property tax accounts associated with them. So it's not really a factor in calculating some of your reimbursements, but by its very nature, the way it's written into regulation and statute, it is included in all of your agreements, just automatically. It's not a special one-off case. It's not a reimbursement for personal property acquisition costs, which also seem to be part of the confusion that the board faced when someone mentioned metal fabrication and tools of the trade and how different that is from public improvements. It seemed that the board was confusing whether the question was reimbursing for these personal property items or whether you're reimbursing from personal property tax revenue. And so I just wanted to highlight the difference there and steer you toward the Assessor's Reference Library. And back to records. And lastly, this seems to be a really concerning issue. It was stated during the last meeting that you're being hit with core requests. And this is Mr. Neal saying, as the secretary wants to point out, that the memory sticks that we did receive have absolutely no records of the DDA lawsuit that occurred back in 2016. And he would like thoughts on having our DDA attorney reach out to the previous custodian demanding the documents. that are all belonging to the DDA. They are attorney-client privilege documents, and they should in fact, in his opinion, be turned over to the DDA. So that's, I take that very seriously. When you speak about the previous custodian of the records, I imagine you're referring to me. I don't know who else you think you're referring to when you say those words. I think you're referring to me. And this sounds very much to me like your intent or your recommendation as the secretary is, who cannot find certain records, is to have your attorney contact me and make demands. And that is not being team DDA. That is not collaboration. That is not respectful nor courteous to a person who has stood before you and offered themselves, made themselves available to help with exactly these kinds of things. So hearing that, I became increasingly concerned, and I want to come and address that. And I want to make it clear on the record in front of everybody that all of the records of the DDA that I have had, I have made available to you, that I gave to I handed over in thumb drives. Now, in the past, we've had serious issues with retention of records via the city. And I'm not going to point to specific things or mention specific people, but large amounts of DDA records have gone missing. It's happened before. Large amounts of attorney-client privileged information have been inadvertently released to people that it shouldn't have been. That's happened before. So if records have been turned over to the city and now some cannot be found, this is a repeat of things that have happened. It does not mean that you should make the assumption they were never given to you in the first place. That's not correct. Secondly, when you say that as the secretary, you're supposed to have all of those documents, I understand why you say that, and I would encourage you to turn to prior secretaries of the board. And Mr. Bourne was the secretary of the board for many years and might be able to help you find the records that you're looking for.
Yeah, 30 seconds.
Third, Mr. Weatherford was the plaintiff in the lawsuit and has the records that you seek, at least the majority of them. He should be able to provide you with them. And lastly, if none of the above is a good and feasible option for you, then consider accessing the email accounts that were turned over to you, wherein all of the lawsuit documents were transmitted to the board, including all the attorney-client privileged correspondence, settlement negotiation discussions, litigation invoices, etc. My last record request was for an email in one of those email accounts, and I was told there appear to be no responsive records to that request. So I do have concern that perhaps you no longer have access to the previous board email accounts. And if that's the case, it should be stated for the record, and the board should explain what happened to that large amount of public record and why it's no longer available.
Okay, while you're at the podium, for the record on that point, were you the administrator of the WPDDA.org domain and emails?
I had access to it. I don't know if that makes me an administrator. I was one of several who had access.
Did you have authority to delete all emails?
No,
No. Okay. Thank you for putting that on the record. You are excused. Thank you. All right. Most of the issues Mr. Coy brought up, some of them were going to be covered in the chair report, and I'll expand my chair report to answer some of his comments. So we'll move on. Next, we have an update on TABA, and I will state where I think we are and where we hope to be, and then we'll let TABA come up and give us an update from their perspective. So as far as the chair knows, our attorney, Mr. McCaskill, has the Form 100 contract, which is the commercial contract for sale of the property. The city attorney and the DDA attorney thought that instead of an addendum to the contract, they wanted what's called a performance deed, which basically is a little stronger legal instrument in if foreclosure is necessary, it has a little bit more teeth to it than just an addendum to the contract. The Tava Group not only agreed to that, but they gave their attorney direction to put that performance deed under, put it together and submit it to the DDA attorney who has it now. We're in agreement on price. The board's been in agreement since last August on that. We've come to an agreement on the only thing in the contract that we're sharing expense on is the environmental and the closing costs, which are fairly minimal. It's basically title work. Beyond that, the DDA and the city attorney felt that it would be prudent to do an amendment to the development disposition agreement. And so that's the piece we're waiting on. From my chair perspective, it's fairly simple. The only element in that disposition agreement that Tav is interested in is during a SMART meeting with the city, city engineer Ben Schmidt communicated that there is infrastructure on Woodland Station that the city feels they should be responsible for and take care of. And it would particularly affect and help with upstream issues. And I don't know what those are, probably very technical in nature. I'm sure the list hasn't been completely defined and most assuredly the cost hasn't been defined. So really the only thing the Tava has indicated is they want a good faith effort by the city that when we get to that phase 3, which I think that's when it's planned in to address those issues, that the city honors their statement that they should be responsible for some of that infrastructure because it solves past ills, if that makes sense. Other than that, there is no other request from Tava for additional monies. Anything that comes before this board outside of the contracts and the development disposition agreement will be in the form of a TIF request, which we will analyze and make a decision on based on the merit and the numbers and the situation at the time. So Tava knows that that is somewhere down in the future. And they know that that is not promised because this board, however it's constituted, has to make that decision. So they're willing to take that risk. And so what we're trying to accomplish is to get that disposition agreement amended, do first reading with city council yet this month. And then hopefully the first meeting in April, city council will take it to a vote and consider the issue. I will remind the public that there was a city council executive session to discuss all of this. And we're hoping that the disposition agreement will not hold us up yet another month or two, which obviously it could. And so, again, it's the chair's position that it's a very simple amendment and update to the disposition agreement. And we're pushing hard for the attorneys to get that updated for us. So stay tuned on that. Tava, would you like to come up and give us your update from what you're doing?
Good morning, everybody. Tony, Chair, thank you for your explanation. What's brought us to this point today. We don't have any other real update except what we'd like to discuss about the contract. We have provided a signed written contract again, an addendum, a phasing plan, a performance deed of trust. We have provided everything we believe that you have requested, and we are ready to proceed with actually signing the contract on behalf of the DDA. The DDA would sign, and then we set a closing date, hopefully between now and the end of April. That's what we're aiming for. We are, Derek's a little more familiar with what we're spending. But we're paying attorney fees and we're paying for consultants and we're about to engage a traffic engineer. This is tens of thousands of dollars that we are consistently spending in good faith that we have a deal that we've all verbally agreed to and you have a written offer in front of you. So we respectfully ask if we could please get that contract signed so that we can make a determination about a closing date and move forward. Derek, is there anything on this?
Any questions for Mr. Weaver?
Is there a reason we can't, as a board, sign the contract now? Is it because we don't have it from the attorney? It just seems to be taking, they wanted to be building by now. They wanted to actually be doing some work and I see almost a year. And we thought it was what can we do can't we sign it and give it to we can sell the property to them, correct?
Yeah, I would say that is correct.
Yep. Chair Perry, maybe this is Marcus McCaskey. Maybe I'll jump in on that. I explained this briefly at the last meeting, but let me jump in and explain this again. So section 808(2) of the DDA statute states that any sale of the property by the DDA has to be at not less than its fair value as determined by the board of directors of the DDA and the governing body, meaning city council. So that's actually what we need ultimately from city council is a determination by motion or resolution that the proposed terms do in fact constitute fair value. And part of one of the conditions that has been discussed is converting the 2009 disposition and development agreement, which was a bilateral two-party agreement between the city and the DDA, converting that to a three-party agreement so that the Tava Group would become party to that agreement. That's the last piece that you just mentioned that we should be able to put into place. Once that's done, I'll get sign off on the form of that agreement from the city attorney, and we should be good to schedule it for consideration by council. So what I would suggest is that the DDA not officially sign the contract unless and until city council has determined that the terms constitute fair value under section 808(2) of the statute.
Yeah, I think, Mr. Gamelki, you're expressing frustration of most of the board members, but Chair agrees with Mr. McCaskey that it wouldn't be proper until we get the governing body, which is city council's approval to execute the contract. You'd be putting the cart before the horse, so to speak. So, I think we're all communicating back to Tava that we're all frustrated. This process is taking so long. The attorneys are aware of it, and we'll work hard to get that amendment done so that we can get it in front of council and hopefully in the time frame I laid out.
Comment.
Yes, sir.
I was unaware that we needed an actual motion or a resolution
For what?
declaring that it's an acceptable fair value or the
That's the
fair
first time I've heard of
value
it.
has been met by the council. I will reach out to other council members to see if I can get that as a topic added to our agenda for the upcoming
Well,
council meeting.
I mean, Mr. McCaskey can speak to it. I think that when the council considers the contract, that's when that discussion will be had and the council gets to make that determination whether the DDA's assessment that it was fair value is in fact fair value. So am I right, Mr. McCaskey, that most likely the city council they don't have to have a separate resolution. They can consider it as part of the contract discussion.
That's correct.
So can that happen at the next city council meeting? Is that a possibility?
As Mr. McCaskey stated, we need the development disposition agreement agreed upon by the city attorney, ourselves. It's pretty clear from ourselves, and Tava has already made it clear there's no impediments other than getting it pulled together. So we'll await the attorneys and that will dictate the timeline. Hopefully, again, get it on first reading in March and before the city council for approval or denial in April. So is that fair? I know.
I guess
Appreciate your frustration.
it makes it close to a year, which is not what we wanted by the end.
That's, yes, welcome to government. All right, any other comments, questions on Tava? Nothing to vote on. So we'll move on to Taylor Enterprises, page 20 in your packet, and as was alluded to earlier during public comment, we'll get into contract law because contract law is its own realm, but something that we put in the new, and what I will say is, and I'll just go on the record that all the work product we've received from Mr. McCaskill, I consider very strong and very good work. And so one of the new items on the new TIP agreement that we'll be considering next month for AJ's is a new section called integration. And I'll just read it because it's very simple, but it's very powerful with respect to contract law. This agreement constitutes the entire agreement between the parties, superseding all prior oral or written communications. So what that's saying is the contract's the contract, irrespective of what we've set up here, what we've said privately to a party, what we've said in emails to a party. And that was missing from previous TIP agreements. And it's a very important component of any agreement, in my opinion, especially when you have a informal volunteer board that's walking through the process. So that said, we determined as a board that with respect to Taylor Mountain Enterprises, and Mr. Taylor is here today, and thank him for bringing it to our attention because the contract at the very least wasn't clear on this point with respect to personal property. But here's what we discovered in digging in per Mr. Taylor's request for us to revisit it. So for 2022, the year we reimbursed, which is actually 2021 taxes, we owe Mr. Taylor an additional $1479.27 for the personal property reimbursement. Because of that section integration that wasn't included in the previous agreement, we have plenty of written emails. Mr. Good communicated in the last meeting that he recalls saying that personal property was included. Mr. Coy has validated that with his discussion this morning. And so it's clear whether it was in the contract or not, that it was the intent of the DDA board. And so we're going to follow through on that intent because it's the right thing to do. During this process, we also discovered that for the 2021 year, the DDA also had not reimbursed Taylor Mountain Enterprises, which was in fact the 2020 year. And so that amount is $2458.44, which includes real and personal property. And so you'll see in your packet later, as Treasurer Anderson goes through it, that we have approved a check for disbursement, which totals $3937.71 to Taylor Mountain Enterprises. That includes, again, the 2020, 2021 tax years. It fulfills our obligation. It fulfills the intent of the previous DDA that real and personal property was included in that contract, whether it was in the contract or not. And so final words is really appreciate Mr. Taylor's patience and assistance in verifying all of the above. So any questions from the board? Yes, Al.
Mr. Perry. I've got some comments and reflections in reviewing the implementing statute, Colorado State statute on the DDA. That was part of my review. Also, some implementing stuff from the Colorado Division of Taxation and the Colorado Division of Property Tax, and then how the Teller County has actually implemented, personal property tax. There's a whole series of things that go into this. To put it into context, in reading the implementing legislation, there's 5 different areas in which the DDA can collect funds. Each of these 5 areas, we have the option of either doing it or not doing it. When the DDA was originally implemented back at the beginning of time, we elected not to go into the area of collecting a direct mill levy. The DDA can collect up to 5 mills on the properties within the DDA district, subject to all of the regulations that would cause the implementation of that. We could also collect sales tax based upon the sales tax that is generated as a result of DDA activity. We elected not to do that. We can do real property tax, which we have elected to do. In the mix is personal property taxes, and I did find one indication in this bank of data that reflected equating real property and personal property. So that kind of blends them together to some degree. But personal property also has a variety of regulations to it. The tax year 2022, the exemption was $50,000. 2023, it is now up to $52,000. What is included in personal property tax? Those items that are used to generate revenue. So if the business has a computer that is used in the generation of income, then that is taxable. If that same computer is in the facility but not used in generating income, it is not taxable. So there's a lot of, ins and out on that. One of the things that I did not know that was interesting, even infrastructure that is owned by the business can be classified as personal property and taxed. So if the water line, the sewer line is coming in, that could be taxed. Kind of an unusual little quirk. Also, in the documents that I reviewed, one of the words that keeps cropping up is the expenditure of TIF funds for the public good and public facilities. Now, going forward, we'll have to decide on personal property, what is personal good or a public facility? And that is what will be then subject. What I'm wondering about right now that I have not been able to ferret out, and maybe I could impose upon our treasurer as we review our TIF funds, are we actually receiving personal property tax funds? Or is that being distributed to the other taxing entities? So to refund or to allow the distribution of TIF funds from collected ad valorem tax on real property is not in question. Whether we distribute funds that are collected from personal property, how do we handle that? So that's a question that I have on acquisition and receipt of personal property tax.
Yeah.
Now, when you start looking at personal property, then we start to run into what is the valuation of it. Each year, you got to probably look at it in terms of depreciation. removal from the business. So there's a lot of nuances that go into determining what the real value. And I'm not talking about the original cost. On day one, original cost is easy to obtain. But on year 2, 3, or 4 down the line, the amount that's attributable to personal property, if we use it, is going to be more difficult to ascertain.
Yeah, so, and I'll be addressing this a little bit in the board chair report.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, with the training, I would like as many of us to attend as possible, but also I did write down your questions to make sure that those are addressed in the training. Okay. So thank you, Mr. Horton. So, any other discussion with respect to Taylor Mountain Enterprises? Mr. Taylor, you showed up this morning. Do you want to say anything?
Yeah, hello. Thank you for addressing this. I appreciate all the time and efforts that everyone put into resolving the issue. Mr. Bourne, one of the things that just came up that you said was you don't know how to value the personal property tax, but the assessor does that for us. And they apply depreciation schedules depending on what kind of equipment you have. They'll depreciate it differently every year. And I have sitting on my desk right now for every property. The assessor sends out a form that says, what have you added, what have you removed this year, and you send it in. Unfortunately, the assessor does not send out by default a schedule of what is on record for you. But just so everyone knows who does personal property, what you do is you call up the assessor's office and you request, and they will send you an Excel spreadsheet of the personal property that is on your account. And so that I found that to be very helpful because sometimes, there's a piece of equipment from years past that you forget is on your schedule and is now, been tossed away or sold. And so you can have that removed, adding new stuff onto the schedule.
Yes, the Colorado Division of Property Taxation cost tables are used as that particular augment. Yes.
Yeah. So there really is no.
So there's
help. Nothing for the board or anybody to do as far as valuing personal property.
Yeah.
It's there already. The tax is the same mill rate as real property. The bill looks exactly the same, for personal and real property. It just at the very top says personal and your real property says real.
Yes.
And they come from the same place. The money goes to the same place.
It is a kind of a nebulous area, I feel,
It's under the radar for most people because it's people don't realize that it's there.
Yeah.
But if you own a business and you use equipment, like you said, in operating your business, you should know about personal property tax.
Yeah. And I run into it in my business too. Yeah.
Yes.
It's
a
strange thought.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Any other questions for me? Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so, in fact, we as a business provide that personal property list to the county with our values, and they take it from there with their adjudication. So the only other thing I'll say about this particular issue, whenever things like this pop up, it's always an opportunity to get, in my world, I call it bigger, faster, stronger. And so we're working with Aaron Vasilati, the city finance director. We're going to go back and look at the 2021 DDA disbursement year. What we've already learned in the 2022 disbursement year is that there were 2 TIF agreement contracts that they paid their taxes, but they did not request a TIF reimbursement. It's my understanding that the previous DDA took the position that, well, if they don't request it, then that's on them. I look at it a little bit differently in the sense that we're contractually bound to that contract and to that TIF reimbursement. In my world, it becomes an unfunded liability, which means that it could have been an oversight on their part, and 2 years from now, they come back and ask for 3 years of TIF reimbursement. That's not in the best interest of the DDA or the TIF reimbursement recipient. So we are going to be proactive, reach out to those two parties, and then also we're putting together a new process to proactively communicate with those parties once we become aware that they've paid their taxes, and we're monitoring that now, to be proactive and letting them know, hey, what's going on? And now if they come back and say, we really don't want it, then we'll get some kind of legal letter from them to provide us cover for that unfunded commitment. But that's just a new process that we're going to work to implement unless the board has any concerns about that. Okay. Okay, just a better way to do business. Okay, AJ's Pizza. We've sent, the attorney drafted a new reimbursement agreement. I think that's all it worked. It included some components that probably should have been in previous agreements, in my personal opinion. Haven't received any feedback from DDA board members. AJ's Pizza, the father-son, they have reviewed it and indicated they're good with it. Mr. McCaskill did provide us a resolution. Now that we've adopted putting resolutions in place for everything we vote on to this magnitude. But unfortunately, in consultation with the city manager and the city clerk, they didn't have enough time to include it on this agenda, and it was material enough that we're pushing that. So you'll see in the April agenda a resolution to formally approve the AJ's TIF reimbursement. Okay, so just staying with our protocol and doing things properly and making sure we're following all the rules. We do have that resolution. You'll see it on the next agenda. But that being said, is there any other discussion on the TIF reimbursement agreement at this time? And we have, I would say, 3 weeks. If you read it for the 5th time and come up with something, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Rebecca. And we'll address it with the attorney. Okay. Okay, so we'll move on. Any new business from the board?
Just a question. I've noticed, and I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I noticed that the city is dumping extra snow down on the property that we, the DDA, are trying to sell Tava House. Has that been approved, or does that continue after they buy the property, or what's up with that?
So, as I understand, we've had a little bit more than average snow recently and been hard pressed to find places to store all of it. So I apologize if that's been the reality, but no, the plan is not to do that on a regular basis. We in snow storage be set aside, but we would need Ben Schmidt, our engineer, to better speak to that.
Yeah. So ostensibly, from my perspective, even though the DDA is the steward of the property, in my opinion, consistent with the city council having to approve the sale, the city technically owns it. We're given a contract to be steward to try to sell it. And so I fully suspect that when Tava takes ownership, that they'll work out a reasonable plan with the city to assist with that snow storage. We have the same thing on the bank property, so we get it. It's tough. So anything else from the board? All right. Okay. Public comment regarding new business. So I guess if anyone wants to say something regarding snow storage. Did I speak out of turn, Tava? That you would work in good faith with the city to address that issue? Okay. They're shaking their heads in the affirmative for those at home. All right, board chair report.
Tony, just really quick point of order. I don't recall that we went through minutes from last meeting. Did any of that consent?
Did I skip that?
I
Okay,
think, yeah,
thank you. Thank you. Boy, I was just so anxious to get to public comments on items not in the agenda. So let's go back to item 4, the consent agenda. Now I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of February 7th, 2023.
I'll motion to approve the minutes of February 7th.
Born seconds.
First by Mr. Miharis, second by Mr. Bourne. Any discussion? Additions, deletions, corrections? Okay, so we'll call for a roll call. We'll do it verbally.
Born, yes. Good, yes.
McCracken, yes.
Melky, yes.
Perry, yes.
Miharis, yes.
Neil, yes.
Anderson, yes.
All right. So in the chair report, we'll address right off the bat. Well, first of all, let's talk about downtown Colorado. As you recall, we at the suggestion of the city manager, and I think it was a great recommendation. For a small fee, we are members of downtown Colorado. And June 8th, they will be doing I would call it a basic PATS increment financing protocols and practices training. It's down in or it's up in Wheat Ridge. Looks like it's a 2-hour training from 11 to 1 on June 8th. I will be attending, and I know we all have businesses and we all have responsibilities, but it would be great if more of us than not could attend that training. I think to get a primer or training from a group of experts who do this across the state and support it across the state, I think it would be a great training. So in your packet, when you get the electronic, you can click on the link and sign up. So I encourage you to do so. And I'll also get it to Rebecca, our admin, to send the link out to you so that you can sign up. I'm also going to encourage you to look at the training they're having October 27th down in Pueblo. And basically, it's tax increment financing. It's a housing summit. And you know, I think knowing that housing, affordable housing, attainable housing, whatever adjective you want to use, is a critical issue within our community. I think for this board to attend that, just to get a primer on that and how downtown development authorities can possibly play in the mix, I think it would be worthwhile. My schedule is clear on both, so I plan on attending both. And again, encourage every board member possible to attend. Any questions on that? So we'll move straight on to the county, and I'll give the kind of the overview of what happened and what we learned. And so first, we're on page 35. So, one of the things we did in embedding ourselves back with the city, because we are a quasi-governmental entity under the city, we're not a separate entity from the city. We work very closely with our finance director, Aaron Dasawati, who I find him to be an incredible financial asset. So I think we're very fortunate as a city to have him as our finance director. He noticed the disparity between the assessor's abstract value and the county treasurer's values. And he notified the county treasurer's office of that. And basically, something that you can check on is our district is District 63. And so you can look at the abstracts from the assessor and the county treasurer. Subsequently, not too long after that, former DDA treasurer Coy did find the same issue and identified the same issue. And I very much appreciated that he reached out to Treasurer Anderson, and they did have a good conversation and went through the calculations, and I think became an agreement that it definitely was out. So thank you, former Treasurer Boyd, on communicating that. So what I'll say is, so Treasurer Salusta investigated and verified the disparity. And essentially, the internet's IT person, they have two disparate systems that don't integrate with each other. And so it literally was a fat finger human error. Mark Salusta took complete responsibility, which he should. He is the county treasurer, irrespective of who in his office actually keyed that in. So human error. They identified the issue. Our city finance director noticed it. A citizen noticed it. And so I think the process worked. I will say that definitely it's on the city finance director's checklist to verify those. And now it's on the DDA process checklist. All these new processes and systems were put in place. We're not only putting them in place, but we're taking time to actually document it so that the next iteration of the DDA board has a starting document to work from, if they so choose, I guess. Treasurer Salusta worked with the Teller County Administrator, the Teller County Commissioners to agree on a solution. The bottom line is that the county made the DDA whole and submitted a check to the city into the DDA account. As former Treasurer Coy communicated. But the good news is here is that it does punctuate the value of having good processes. So Mr. Vassalotti had a good process. He was kind of watching the city and the DDA's back on that. As Mr. Coy alluded to, citizens paying attention is part of that process, especially when we're dealing with government. In my opinion, Mr. Salusta did several things right, took responsibility and found a solution. And bottom line is that the DDA is not harmed. Now, the worksheet for all of this, and you'll notice at the top, this was offered by Rebecca Riddell, our treasurer, and Tanner Coy. And this lines out the revenues received, and I will point to the bottom that it's in smaller print, which I always hate because I'm getting older, but 41. I'm not going to go through all the calculations, but they've been verified on multiple levels. And the one piece that could throw calculations off is that they're in tax area 63. We did not collect 100% of the taxes. There's $2,392.18 remaining uncollected. And what I will say there is that I think it's okay. As DDA chair, I'm going to reach out to those parties and encourage them to pay their taxes because I think that's appropriate. Anyway, so those are the calculations down there. So basically, at the end of the day, we were reimbursed $75,863.07. I shouldn't say reimbursed. We were paid for the taxes that we were due per tax district 63. So I'm not going to go through the calculations. I'm very confident they're accurate. They've been vetted by the assessor's office, the county administrator, the city of Woodland Park's finance director, ourselves, Rebecca, myself. So if you have any questions moving forward, please forward those to us and we'll come back and revisit it. But the system worked. Combination of a good city check, good citizen check, and it just worked. And we as a DDA, in addition to the city check, can add in our processes that we're checking those abstract values. And again, we'll have a process document that we'll post that can be used for future DDAs if they so choose. Any questions on that? All right, before we move to the treasurer's report, which will be fairly quick, I'll try to be succinct here because I did write some notes based on Mr. Coy's public comment. And I want to make something very, very clear. With those core requests that we received, did not bother me at all. That's the process. We have 3 business days, starting the business day after the initial business day request to respond to those core requests. If we feel we need additional time, we can communicate that to the core requestor and find additional time for those documents. So I think core requests are critical to checks and balances on government. And so this chair, and I think this DDA has no problems with core requests. We hadn't, what I will say is we hadn't had any up until that last month or so. But what it did was it forced us to think through the process and how do we want to, again, put together a process that's documentable so that we do it consistently moving forward. We did, as Mr. Coy communicated, receive a core request last week. The county looked for those records. We looked basically in the thumb drive records because there were no emails codified there. We reached out to Noel Sawyer, former city council person, also at one point DDA liaison. Also, he's a pretty high level IT person. He actually helped a previous DDA set up wpdda.org as a domain, not only for a website, but also for emails. What he reports, and I had heard it before, but we reached out to him, we being Mr. Neal and I reached out to him last week and just wanted to verify the process. When the current DDA started utilizing the city emails, and Mr. Sawyer went to archive the previous emails from that domain, he reports that all the emails have been deleted. So do we know who deleted them? Absolutely not. Do we know that we have no access to them? Absolutely. We did also investigate primarily through him. I'm not recalling who the hosting company was. I do recall it wasn't a national brand that I recognize, being a former IT person. Is it possible to go back and to that company and pay monies to possibly retrieve those archived emails if they have them? The answer from Mr. Sawyer, and I trust his expertise and it validates my perception, is probably not. So those emails from the previous DDA appear to be gone forever. I'll put that on the public record. Do not find them on the thumb drive. Maybe in one of the boxes they'll magically appear as printouts, but I suspect not. So we do not have those records. So we did reply to Mr. Coy in the negative that we could not produce those records. Will not be able to produce those records. What it did do, again, in the vein of my mantra of bigger, faster, stronger, it triggered a discussion with the city clerk talking about retention schedules. In my banking world, everything is 7 years or forever until eternity. And so our Suzanne Leclerc is going to provide us with kind of the state guidance on retention schedules. For instance, legal is 6 years. And so Mr. Coy referred to those attorney emails that went back and forth between the DDA and Benedetti and Neville's law firm. We have no record of them. Theoretically, we could request them from the attorneys. I suspect that will come at great expense. And, from my position, it would be hard for me to, as the chair, just speaking personally, for me to argue that we should expend money trying to retrieve those documents. But I do know other board members have different perspectives. And I don't want to have that conversation now. I just want to make you aware that at this juncture, with respect to the attorney records Mr. Neal referred to, we do not have them, period. And we do not have the emails, period. But we are going to adopt a retention schedule for the DDA. We'll present that, again, another process document of here's how long we retain certain kinds of documents according to state guidance statute. And we'll adopt that and we'll mimic the city. Right now, the city has a 2-year retention schedule on emails. And so we'll probably bring forward the retention schedule and ask this body to approve that retention schedule. And we're going to mimic the city as much as possible, if not completely and entirely. So moving forward, the goal will be to not be missing documents that we are charged with retaining. For whatever reason, they're missing. And so that addresses the emails. Again, to the public out there, any core requests that you want to send in, we have no heartburn over it. We have a process now. We do have to regain access to the website because we did have the first 2 we added up to the city website right away. And right now our credentials aren't working. We'll work that out, but we'll get this 3rd request up with that response. And wanted to address a few of the other things, but I think former Treasurer Coy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write up a very succinct treatise to address some of the things you brought up. And that way it can be put on the public record and be very concise and clear as to my perspective on all the things that you wish to discuss. So I will do that forthcoming. With that, we will move on. Any questions on any of that? Yes, Mr. Good.
And just to clarify, these records were lost during this new board setting or the previous?
Well, it depends on how you look at it. If you look at it like this current board transitioned to the city emails, and the previous board who had control, whoever did, I have my guesses, it doesn't matter, had control of the previous emails that when Mr. Sawyer went to archive them, it had all been deleted. And so, you tell me.
That they were there when this board was, the new board was set in place at that time, I'm sure, right?
Well, point of information, Jerry, I can comment on some of that.
Sure.
When we had a change in some of the board members and I became the secretary, I had reached out to Mr. Coy asking for the root password on my T. So I understand the difference between an admin password and the root. I had asked for root and then I logged in to go in and turn off the accounts that had not been reappointed to the board. What I saw when I went in there is I was not given the root password. I was given an admin password that I could turn off, but it was a shared password. As fast as I was turning them on or turning them off, they were being turned back on. I have no way of knowing because I didn't go into the log files to try to track down an IP address of where it was logged in from. All I can tell you is the password that has the power to turn something off and to delete. I was not given. There were some things there, emails, but not in any great volume. So there has been some sort of deleting sometime along some timeline. I can't tell you who, what, when, where, why. At a later time, when we were trying to decommission it, somebody had gone in and changed the password, so I could not even go in again. I didn't do anything about it. I just tracked down who had the root password and was, I found out it was Noel Sawyer did have the root password. I don't know if he was the only person that did, but he was the one that was able to go in and decommission that email account. I'm an IT professional. He's an IT. I just knew he would do the steps that you normally do when you decommission something, which is to create an archive file or a backup. And that's why when he came back and said there were no emails, I trust that there were no emails, and he decommissioned it. So I can't tell you when all of the emails were deleted. When some of them were deleted, it was not a normal email, or it was not a normal situation, how that email server was being managed. And it's a good thing that we finally turned that off and got out of that environment and onto the cities where we can follow the more rigid processes from a security perspective, if nothing else. And just FYI, every single previous DDA board member's account throughout time was still active. Every one of them. So nobody had ever turned off a previous DDA member, regardless of when they left the board. So anybody could have come back in at any time. I hope that's a good enough explanation, Jerry.
Yeah, so I guess what I'll say, and this will be published to the city DDA documents area under core requests. But basically, the records request was for any email sent to Alborn with the text Gold Hill Theaters and the subject or body. Again, the city came back negative, and the DDA, we made a good attempt to find out if those emails had been properly archived. And again, Mr. Sawyer reports that it couldn't be archived. So then we sent the negative response to Mr. Coy, and essentially his comment was that he recalled that in 2019, he had sent an email to Mr. Bourne with that Gold Hill Theaters and the subject or body of the email. So that's 2019. So if we had been on the city's email system at that time, it would have already been deprecated unless we archived it in a different way. And so I guess, I'll offer you, Mr. Coy, if you can tell us specifically what you're searching for, it may be in some other format that we'd be happy to explore for you.
Are you asking?
Yeah, because you're requesting for a document that you were aware of that you said you sent to this party.
My purpose in asking for that was to see if the record existed, because in the December meeting, you as the chair stated that you did not have access to previous board email accounts. And that was a very brief comment as part of a broader conversation, but it struck me as important because that's a significant part of public record. And if you don't have access, that's a problem.
Okay.
So I had forgotten all about that until I was cleaning out paperwork and my desk tray the other day. I had made it through quite a bit of paperwork, and I had some notes on the back side of paper. I flipped it over and it was a hard copy of that email. It just made me remember that statement that you'd made from December. And I thought, I should check this, particularly in light of the secretary's concern over missing records. And I know that those records will exist in the email accounts because that's how the lawsuit documents mostly were transmitted to the DDA board and among DDA board members. So in order to help you restore that record that you're so concerned about, I thought if you have that email record, you will have all of those records. So I asked for one of those emails and as you said, you responded that you didn't have it. So I am concerned about that. When I contacted Mr. Neal and gave him the login credentials that I had, I said at the time, I hope you recognize this as a good faith gesture and a willingness to work with you as I'm reaching out and providing this information. I also said at the time to Mr. Neal that although certain documents were no longer visible on the public side of the website, that there were a lot of documents embedded in that site and in that domain that were important. So we had that conversation and that record, I know that record was intact when you were given access. What happened after that, I do not know. But I can tell you, I did not access at any point after I gave you those credentials and turned it over complete and intact.
So two things, since you actually have the document you requested from us, I would request that you provide that to us and we'll put it on the record with that core request.
Gladly.
Okay, number two, so I am very aware, intimately aware of who ran the previous DDA, irrespective of titles, irrespective of positions, and who had control of everything. And what I will say, and you spoke to this a little bit earlier, and I'll stand by this, that this DDA, I should say, myself as chair, I'm interested in moving forward, doing better, doing smarter. I suspect if, I did start doing a document search and we are missing a lot of documents. Okay. And so the question then becomes, okay, what's the benefit cost to the public with respect to how that has played out? What I will say is that as chair, I am interested in moving forward and doing bigger, faster, stronger, documenting processes, being very clear with how things are being done, how they're being communicated, who's doing what. It's a DDA effort. It's not a singular or isolated effort by any one DDA board member. We're all working on this together. We're all communicating well together properly. Proper meetings, no illegal meetings, no illegal communications that I know of. Reply all is always the bane of anything in the email world. So we're interested in moving forward. And I would say that based on my initial work in analyzing the past, it does not look good for certain parties of previous DDA, previous DDA members. I have no interest in that. I don't want to spend my life worrying about that because at the end of the day, irrespective of whether I felt it was right or wrong, or whether I thought it was sloppy or unprofessional, at the end of the day, I can't tip over of the effort this DDA board would have to expend to explore the past. There's no benefit, in my opinion, to the community, to the citizens with that effort. And so I do not intend to engage in that effort. And so we're moving forward. We're doing things right. We are learning on the fly. We are getting better every single month with our processes, with our systems, with our knowledge. We're very independent thinkers up here. There is no, everyone has an open forum to discuss whatever they will. We've had great conversations, which, you've missed some meetings where this DDA board was engaged. And so final comment to you is I would be careful in making statements that might be hard to walk back, if that doesn't matter. As long as I'm chair, my position is we're moving forward. Don't really care about the past.
Which board members are you referring to that it doesn't look good for? And what documents is it that you are missing? Because you say it every meeting and it's time to stop saying it. If you really are focused on moving forward, why do you repeat it every single meeting? Let's solve the
Because it
problem.
seems to come up. So,
Well, you bring it up as the chair, you bring it forward and you say it.
so I will. I'll
Let's
ask
get
for
it out
clarity.
there and say, what
Would
are
you
you
like
missing?
me to put together a report of my past findings? I don't want to.
Can you just tell me what you're missing? Can you tell the public what you're missing?
I can put together a report. 'cause
That would
it's
be,
plentiful.
that would be nice. That would be really good.
Okay, I'll tell you what.
Instead of vague innuendo, get specific. Let's find the records. If you need them, tell me. I've offered my help over and over and over. But this passive aggressive reference to the past has got to stop. It's not fair. It's not right. It isn't true.
I
and it's
just
gotta
offered you
stop.
an olive branch to the future. So,
Let's,
you
okay,
know
I
what?
accept.
I actually have. I'll make some free time. I will put together a report. I'll vet it with our attorney and then you can get with your attorney and we'll talk about it. How about that? I'll be very clear.
What
on that.
attorney involvement is necessary for us to discuss the missing records and find them?
I'm just saying that there's a lot of information here. So I'll make the effort if you want. I really don't want to. I want to move forward. But I'm only speaking for myself. I do know there are board members who want to advance that information. And my position is let's move forward, team. Yes, Mr. Neal.
Well, I'm gonna ask, since you brought it up, can you put together an instruction sheet on where I can find on the memory stick or in the boxes, any records other than invoices? Because that's what are the only records I could find about the entire past lawsuit, invoices. If there's any correspondence between any board member and an attorney, we have a 3-year period of a lawsuit. Any search criteria you do on that memory stick produces 0 results. If you can write just an instruction, because I don't want to have to go down to Colorado Springs or Denver to meet with your attorney to get instructions or guidance on how to interpret things, which was it's almost a hostage situation that I was being forced in to try to get two files for Council Member Nakai, that I would only be given it, or she would only be given those records if we went to Denver and met with a previous attorney. If there's no conditions, you'll just give me instruction sheets where to find them on the records. I'd be happy to retract my statement that I cannot find a single, and I'll be careful because there are documents, there are invoices, a germane statement or an important correspondence between attorney and any DDA members regarding the lawsuit. There's nothing that I can find on any search criteria I've ever tried.
I can tell you right now, without writing down any instruction for you, that all of the files that I had any copy of that weren't in the email records themselves, anything I had downloaded and saved in a folder that had to do with the lawsuit, I saved in a separate folder. It was on a separate thumb drive from regular DDA records, and multiple thumb drives were submitted.
We received 2.
You should have at least 2. Yeah, I don't recall how many, but I know there were, not all the files fit on one. The legal files were on a separate thumb drive, and that's because I had been advised by not my attorney. Twice now you've referred to my attorney, and I think you may be referring to Paul Benedetti, who was the DDA's former attorney. Okay, not my attorney. This is not me holding you hostage or your records hostage or anything like that. Whatever conversation you have with him is between you and him. But those records, I was advised to keep separate because there was attorney-client privileged information there, and to not mingle those into other mainstream open public records, so that in the event an Records Act request was submitted for those documents, there would be one step of consideration before simply releasing them. An evaluation of these are in the legal folder, maybe we should check that they are, open public records and not.
Okay, I'm going to restate my request. Please write down on instructions which disk which memory stick you provided to, tell me which one and what folder, and I will go back to the city clerk and I will conduct a search following your instructions.
Sir, there is no name for the memory stick. It was black and it was this big.
Sure.
And it was turned over with the others. That's what you were given. And in addition, you were given access to the complete record of all the board email accounts that have all those records. You were given, you individually were given that. You had it and you had all those records. I don't know where they've gone from there. I am not the custodian of them, and I can't tell you where to go find them other than the thumb drives that were submitted and the email accounts that you were given. That's all I can tell you.
And I'm not going to dispute that you gave me a password that may or may not have given me access to go in and look for it. I never spent the time looking. That was not my intent. My intent was to simply turn off a couple accounts. As an IT expert, we had a turnover of members. You always remove access. And it was in the process of trying to remove access that I found out that no matter how many times I removed access, they could turn it and were turning them right back on. I only made 2 attempts. And after I saw that this is a futile exercise, and we had already had discussions about going to a different mail server, the past was the past. I spent 0 time exploring what I could really find out down in there. I just left it alone. I was focused, as Mr. Perry has said, on the future. The history, I did not want to keep reliving.
Well, that might be a part of the problem because that past is the public record. Those records may be of the past and you might not have interest in them, but they are part of the public record and need to be maintained. So by not looking at them or not making backups or copies prior to the account being, not funded and closed, may be the reason why those records no longer exist. I don't know.
Mr. Clay, I want to end this, but just for the record, the person that had root admin permissions has put on the record, there were no emails there before he decommissioned the server. So your statement is an impossibility to have accomplished. And I'm done. Thank
You could have backed them up, Rusty.
That is what you call archive in the IT world, by the way. So the final thing I'll say, because you threw out a little tidbit. So one of the differences, when I started looking through the documents at a deep level, it struck me that the DDA invoices from the attorneys had no detail. And so as we approve our attorney's invoice today, board, please note that it does come with detail, and that's purposeful. If there's any areas in there that a board member wants further insight or clarification of what happened on that particular expense line item, that's always open. But it's in my world, and I deal with 4 different attorneys in 4 areas of law. We always get the detail, verify the detail as part of the process. So it was very interesting that none of the actual attorney invoices that we got, we have some from Benedetti, the former DDA, and many of them have no detail. It just says spoke with Mr. Coy without detail.
The detailed invoices were marked confidential
Okay.
and they were part of those lawsuit files. And so through that period, the DDA was receiving 2 invoices from the attorney each month. One was the detailed litigation report that showed exactly what you just described. The other was the abbreviated invoice that was open public record.
Okay. Okay. Well, we'll go back and look. I still, based on discussions with a lot of stakeholders, and we just had another meeting yesterday around this. Again, I'm still going to come down on expenditure of monies, effort, time with respect to benefit cost to the public. That's what it comes down to. And that's kind of the probably the legal standard we're discussing here. So we'll think about it as a board as to how we approach that. I'm not gonna let you wag me around. We'll decide whether we want to revisit the past or not. Again, it's my desire not to.
And I'm not trying to wag you around or steer you toward that. I'm only here because of the comments I heard in the recent meetings and the deep concern over records and all the comments I keep hearing about the records. And I'm here trying to help and offering whatever assistance I can. That's why I'm here. So if you don't see it as valuable to go back and research all that, so be it.
No.
I
I've
follow
spent
your
personally
leadership.
40 plus hours looking at the records, including the 2 thumb drives that were provided to the city. So again, I have been looking at the records. So anyway, we'll leave it at that and move on. So thanks for going on the record.
You're welcome.
Okay. We'll move on. Treasurer report.
Okay, we have a few invoices that we paid this month. The first one, as you'll see, is to Taylor Mountain Enterprises, which we've already discussed at length. Regarding their TIF reimbursement, there was a 2021, a $2,458.44 that was never paid. And then we still owed for 2022 on the personal property, $1,479.27. So we gave him a check for $3,937.71. We're also going to find a invoice for the annual loan payment to the city for $120,000. That's on our loan bond there. And then we have our admin from Rebecca Allen for February, which is $325. And lastly, our attorney bill to Mr. McCaskill for $5,961.96.
Are there any questions on any of those invoices?
Seems like, I'm just kind of looking at the hours on AJ's. Seems like there's a lot of time in that, more time than I thought would be consumed there.
Well,
Expense.
Yeah, in reviewing it, remember, well, I will say that the direction given by the chair and I don't know if it was Mr. Neal or Miss Anderson, was to not only draft an agreement for AJ's, but 2023 Watson appropriate TIF reimbursement agreement. And so we asked them essentially to look at all the language. And if you look at this TIF reimbursement agreement, compare it to the past ones, it's kind of a rewrite. I think it's more professionally written. I think it's stronger. And again, adding that final item 26 that you'll see in the agreement was critical because, as you know, as a DDA board member, you're talking to parties. You may inadvertently say something to a potential TIF applicant that they construe as part of a contractual arrangement. And so adding that number 26 was critical to shore up this contract. And so I would say that all the work done on AJ's is the new template for moving forward when we get additional TIF requests. So I think the work was warranted.
Right. So although it says AJ's, it was actually some work on
Yes,
revising our TIF agreement, right?
Yes.
So it's not all AJ's expense.
I would say it's a pretty good rewrite.
Okay,
Just the revision.
sounds good.
So I think it was appropriate. And I don't know, Mr. McCaskill, am I communicating that properly? We have to get off the.
Chair Perry, yeah, that's accurate, and I also of some of the initial drafting on the form of the reimbursement agreement was done by my associate, Mr. Myers, and I did write off about 3 or 4 hours of his time as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, and in my world, Mr. McCaskill, you charge what you do. So, but thank you for the right. the citizens of the park appreciate it. Okay, so any other questions on any of those? We're paying, it's early in the year, but the payment on the Woodland Station property is due in 2023, and we had the funds, and so last year we didn't do it until the end of the year, so I think it's appropriate just to get it done and out of the way. And hopefully it becomes a new point shortly when the property is sold. Okay. Okay. So now we'll go to any board member that wishes to report or comment on anything. We'll start with Mr. Bourne.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do. What I'd like to do is reflect on our bylaws. In section 6, entitled property, it states that the woodland, well, the WPDDA may hold, sell, trade, or lease property in the name as directed. The word that is missing and the word that is permitted and enabled in the Colorado revised statutes that enable the DDA is the word to purchase. We may have the opportunity or the need to purchase property in the future. Right now, our bylaws prohibit that. We need to include that. Therefore, I would like to seek either a resolution to have our attorney proceed to include that word and that word only, or a motion, whatever is most appropriate.
Consistent with our new modality, it's a resolution.
Is the resolution.
I guess what we can direct is for the attorney to take a look at that to make
Yeah.
sure that it's appropriate and gives a future DDA that flexibility if it arises.
Yes.
Good.
It is a permitted activity by state statute.
So I'm gonna leave, and before we move to Mr. Good, let's go ahead. I am off my game today.
Okay.
I'm gonna go ahead and recommend or entertain a motion to approve the treasurer reports.
Bourne will so
Or
move,
ratify, I'm sorry.
or ratify. Bourne will so ratify the treasurer's report.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Second by Mr. Neal, first by Mr. Bourne. We'll do a roll call vote.
Bourne, yes.
Good, yes.
Kraken, yes.
Gamelki, yes.
Perry, yes.
Miharis, yes.
Neil, yes.
Anderson, yes.
Okay. So Mr. Bourne has requested that the attorney look at inserting that word to purchase in that section 6 under property. And so we'll revisit that. Mr. Good, any reports from your perspective?
No.
Okay. Mr. McCracken,
Nothing for me.
Mr. Gamelki,
Nothing from me.
nothing from Chair Perry.
Nothing from Miharis.
Just a point of information, the executive session that was called by the city council did take place. Thank you. And if you want to see what the council described, it's all on YouTube. You can go ahead and just take a look at it. But
They described it in a subsequent
well, they
city
didn't
council meeting.
describe it. In the council meeting, they covered what the topic was and what the council voted regarding it.
Okay.
In fact, there was no vote regarding it. It just did occur, though. I just wanted to report that as well.
Can I ask a question on that? Who are the participants in that?
I'll go by memory.
Okay,
The mayor was there, the city manager was there, the city clerk was there. The city attorney was there, the DDA attorney was there. I'm kind of going around the room in my memory.
City planner,
City planner was there,
Rebecca and I represented the DDA.
the two were there, and all council members were there. Was Mr. Ott there?
Mr. Ott was,
I don't think, yeah, minus
he
Mr.
was the only council member that
That
was
was not there. And that's my recollection of who
so
was there.
there was no Tava House representative there.
No,
Correct.
nope. No. Okay, hearing no other discussion. Sorry, I thought this would be a quick meeting. So I apologize for that. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
Bourne moves to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you. Awesome.